Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about property rights and the importance of staying consistent with them even when you would have to condone an action that you don't necessarily believe in or agree with. So basically, the justification for property rights from an objectivist perspective is just this idea that you have your own mind, you have the ability to think for yourself and act for yourself. That's a necessary requirement for human survival, which is ultimately the moral good that all human beings should pursue. And then you get into ethics, and then everything ultimately reduces back down to another branch of philosophy. So you can't really make a standalone case, but that is basically the justification for politics that comes from the objectivist ethics. But so every human being has the right to use their own mind, to act for themselves, to pursue their own life, which is the moral good, which is, essentially, you can't just think and act. You have to take the results of your actions in order to actually survive, because we as human beings have a physical body. We cannot just simply think and survive. We have to actually take action and keep the results of our action if we want to survive. You can't just plant a banana tree and then, if that's the only thing you can eat, plant a banana tree and grow some bananas, I don't know, and then not get to eat the bananas and survive. That's not how human survival works. So essentially you need property rights. You need to keep the results of your action to use how you want to. Otherwise, there's little incentive to actually act and create property. And it's completely immoral to not get to to take the results of someone's actions, because you are infringing on their survival. So ultimately, that is why property rights are an absolute. That's why the government needs to protect property rights, for the reasons I outlined. But sometimes it's very difficult to want to support someone's property rights, especially when it's a case of something like discrimination. Like you have the baker who discriminated against the gay wedding, the gay person who wanted them to bake them a wedding cake. That's really hard to support, because I don't like the idea of somebody discriminating against a gay person just because of their sexuality or because of things like that. Same thing with, this is going to be very controversial, but same thing with race or gender or anything of the sort. This is very difficult to support, and I personally think it's a very stupid decision, and not necessarily something I would agree with. But I don't have the right to force them to provide their services anyways. We live in a capitalist economy, which I view as a completely moral and good thing. But the reason it's moral and good is because each person gets to choose who they interact with. And each person gets to choose who they sell to and who they buy from. Think about this in reverse. What if we forced somebody to buy something from someone, even though, for just that fact? I think it's very hard to justify that. Even if there's someone who's black who's selling something, and there's a racist white person who's not going to buy from them because they're black. You can't force them to buy something from them, even if that's a terrible justification and completely immoral and based on absolutely nothing, because race is meaningless. Even if it's based on absolutely nothing, you still can't do that. It's a violation of their property rights. It's a violation of the trader principle, the idea that every transaction needs to be win-win, that each person needs to feel like their transaction is win-win. Otherwise, it's completely immoral, because you're asking a person to act against what he believes is his self-interest. And that's that's simply self-destruction. You're forcing somebody to be what is in their view self-destructive. Because capitalism is a transaction. It's not something where these producers simply create stuff and then they're like, oh, I'm going to provide it to everybody. That's not how capitalism works. You produce something and then you make a trade with it. You have this good that you produced and you're like, okay, so I'm going to go out to the market and then I'm going to make a trade that I feel is win-win. And now for some reason these people don't feel like because of someone's race that it's a win-win transaction, or because of someone's sexuality it's a win-win transaction. I think they're fucking stupid. If you can make extra profits, I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't. But for whatever reason, these people are not very smart and focus way too much on race and sexuality and shit like that when it doesn't matter at all. But it's their right. It's their right to do it. It's disgusting. It's stupid. It's terrible. But it's absolutely in their right to do it because they're providing the good or service, and it needs to be a win-win transaction for it to be a moral transaction. It's completely immoral. And ultimately, capitalism will punish them. A free market system will punish them. Have you ever noticed in an economics class, they always have these assumptions for profit maximization that you need to be rational, or that actors act in their self-interest and that's how profits then that leads to profit maximization. Well, if these people are not actually acting in their self-interest or acting rational, they're not going to maximize their profits. They're going to be punished for their discrimination by lower profits. And ultimately, I think in the modern world, if somebody notices that a certain company is being discriminatory, then we can boycott the company. And I mean, there's that plus the lower profits that they're going to have to deal with because they're not selling to a whole section of people in a completely arbitrary reason. So yeah, ultimately that is why we should still stick to property rights, and let people sell to whomever they want, even if we don't necessarily agree with it, even if we think it's the stupidest decision ever. This is not a racist argument by me. There's a lot of racists who will make this argument, but who will make an argument for discrimination, but that is not the argument I'm making here. I'm simply making I don't want my argument to be misconstrued at all here, because there is so much potential for it to be misconstrued. I'm simply making a consistent property rights argument, and it's based on a win-win principle. I do not condone racism. Racism is stupid because race is meaningless. I don't promote discrimination of any kind. I don't view it as a moral thing. I think you have the right to do something that's wrong. I don't think the government should force you to think in a certain way, even if I believe that is the proper way to think. Even if it is the proper way to think, even if it actually is in your self-interest to act that way, I don't believe that's the government's role. The government's role is to protect your property rights, to protect your liberty, protect your life, or protect your rights in that sense. Protect life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness, all those sort of things. And I don't think it's the government's job to say who you have to sell to or anything like that, because that, for all the reasons that I mentioned before, it's really a shame that this position has to be associated with the racists and the people who believe discrimination is good, because that's always how it's what the position's been associated with. If you look back to the civil rights time, the loudest people who were arguing for discrimination were the Klan and the fucking terrible ass racist people. The people who I would hate to ever associate with on anything. You guys see how fucking against the fucking groypers and the alt-right fucking idiots I have been throughout my channel's history. Obviously I hate associating with those people in any position, but to be consistent with property rights and be consistent with my principles, this is the position I have to go from. And it's a completely different justification from anything that they would ever offer. So it sucks that you have to be associated with them, but that's how. But consistent objectivists and consistent people who consistently believe in property rights, this is the position that we have to hold because of our principles. And it is associated with the racists, but I mean, ultimately we can't go against a principle that is true because of who is associated with that principle, because of fear of how other people will react to it. So ultimately, I think that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.